it's very extreme in the reviews. It's either
Yeah.
people adore it or they hate it, which is like in both cases, maybe a bit too much. But at the end
Yeah.
of the day, I'd rather have movies that create a strong emotion, even if it's reject, than something in between. Oh, the movie was okay. People
Right.
remember the films, and I feel that's the same with actors. Sometimes actors read my script, they don't understand my universe at all. And sometimes, like you said, I had wonderful actors come on board because they fell in love with the script and then we discussions and they felt safe with me and I respect them. I respect the work a lot. So I feel that being an actor on one of my sets is always a pleasure because it's a collaborative work. So I'm very open to their perspective. The first take is always their own vision. I would never impose something before we start. So I always want their truth, the way they envision things. And then we start from the first take and build up together. We ask questions together. I just feel that this togetherness thing is something very strong on my sets.
Good day, filmmaker Amanda Sthers. Amanda, how are you on this fine summer day?
I'm great. I'm very happy to be here with you.
I'm happy you're here as well. And I think it's somewhat unusual for me to have someone on the podcast who is not like has a project coming out. I did find out as we communicate about this, you do have promises coming out in September, and I'm excited to talk with you about that. But when you listen to filmmakers and you run your own production company, so I imagine you have an idea on this. When you listen to filmmakers, directors, or even actors talking on podcasts, how much do you think is them doing it because they have to do it for their project and you weigh that in and their sincerity? And how much is you think this is it, you can tell the genuine love of the art? Is that something that when you're listening, you can tell that?
Yeah, I think obviously there's different ways of doing things. We're always passionate, but when you have to tell the same story over and over again, 100 times, even if you're passionate about it, yeah,
Right.
you're a little less after a moment. And I feel that it's always very interesting, even for us to, it's like a therapy session. Like we are trying to always understand what motivates us, what's the next thing we're gonna be talking about, what is the goal. Do we still have this passion burning because it's so hard to put a movie together that you need almost an obsession. Yeah, I feel that it's always very interesting when a filmmaker is just speaking about art in general or what motivates him rather than about a precise
A
project that he's
specific.
promoting. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. That's a great answer. So looking on your career, it looks like you first got involved in art through writing. Is that right? And then you other people brought you into filmmaking from your writing, or was there a different way?
So there's two different ways. So first, I
Yes.
started as a novelist. That was my dream, and I'm still a novelist. It was always my first motivation. And when I sent my first novel, the first draft of a novel when I was 15, I met this wonderful publisher who told me, You're a bit young and it's still fresh, but you're going to do that for sure. But you have a sense of dialogue I've never seen in years. He used to be a screenwriter. And so he told me, Why don't you write for movies? And I must say that I was a movie lover, but I didn't even think we had anyone writing the movies. It was something very mysterious to me. And all of a sudden it clicked and I was, oh God, yeah, that's wonderful. So I went to buy a book, How to Write a Movie. And I wrote a script and a second one and a third one. And I ended up winning a contest. And I was, I think, 19 and
Wow.
I won a contest, the French Film Festival for the best young screenwriter, and after that found an agent. And so that was one direction that it started. And because I had a hard time, like every screenwriter, to sell my script, I wanted people to see how it would look like on the screen. So at 19, I directed my first short movie. but it was more to just showcase my work as a writer. I didn't think I
Okay.
would love it, and honestly, the first time I went on a set, it was mine. So I've never been
That's
on a
so
set
cool.
before, and at 19, I found this way. I was always very convincing and passionate, so I found ways to have people come on board and put money on my small project, and I directed this short movie that is very charming. It was still film at the time, and I think a lot of what I've learned come from the fact that I started with film, so I had a very few takes. We didn't have enough money to have that many takes. It was a nice crew, and it was very interesting. So that's how I really got myself into the movie business, and then it took
Wow.
10 more years for me to direct my first movie. And it wasn't really my decision. I was writing a movie for a studio that basically ordered me a French Love Actually. This is what they wanted.
That's what they told you? Oh
And so
god.
I wrote it my own way, but it was this mix of all of a lot of different love stories coming together. It was called Je vais te manquer, which is the French translation of I will miss you. Because for us, it's not transitive. We say I miss you, but not like I will miss you is something a bit strange for us. So the translation is quite funny. And the director who was attached to the project had something else. Everything was messed up, and they were looking for a new director. And the head of the studio at the time, and it was a French woman called Brigitte Macchioni, that I owe her a lot of my career, said, "Why don't you do it yourself?" And I was 29, and I said, "Okay, I'll do it." I don't know if that would have been the first movie I would have written for myself if I knew
Right.
I was gonna direct it, because I don't think people were expecting me to do something that, when I say commercial or mainstream, because on the side, I had my other career as a novelist that was much more literary, very intellectual, so they didn't expect that. But I was in love with everything when I started directing. I understood things in a very different way, and I also think the way I write now changed because I'm also a filmmaker. So even if I write for other people, I can understand a lot of different things because I know how a set works.
Wow, that there's so much to unpack there, Amanda. So, as a teenager, you got into that's just a wild story. So, all the projects you've done on film, you've written, right? There's not been a film that
Yes.
you haven't written.
So I just
Why?
co-written the second script, Madame.
Okay,
I was lucky enough to have Matthew Robbins come and help me, who's a
okay.
legendary screenwriter that I've met when I was quite young, and always helped me in my career. And he did the last draft with me, mostly to make sure that my English was okay. And he also
Ah,
gave me
okay.
a couple of tips and twists, and it was a wonderful moment to work with him. But most of the scripts I wrote myself. Yeah.
And is that something that you would advise? Do you feel like that's staying true to yourself? What circumstances would it take for you to take on a script that you hadn't written?
It's a good question because I receive a lot of scripts to direct, and it's either something that's aligned with my own neuroses, my own obsession, but someone would have done it better than I
You.
I do it myself, or something
Right.
quite unexpected that I would have never written myself. Something where
Mm.
I think, "Oh god, that's very interesting." But the only thing I need to stick to when I receive a script is something that I would wanna go watch in the theaters.
Yourself,
I
yeah.
need to make sure that I'm sincere. So sometimes I even receive good scripts, but it's just not the type of movies I like. For example, I don't like horror films. I don't watch them.
Nothing
So
against horror films, but yeah, that's
no,
just what
and
you
I
do,
can
yeah.
understand, I can see when I it's a good script for a horror film, but I just don't feel that it's something I would deliver. It's also another genre. You need to know the codes. You need to know a lot of things that I don't. But yeah, I know I would be open to it for sure.
And in your work as a novelist, you mentioned you had a successful career as an intellectual literary, say, novelist. Did you write those books with, the films in mind, or is it always, filmmaker can you tell when you're reading a book that the writer had a film adaptation in mind when they're writing it, or do you separate the 2 when you're writing? "Oh, I'm writing now for my film, even though maybe it's a book," type of thing?
No, I'm very honest with it. If I write for a film, I would write directly a screenplay, but
Okay.
when I wrote Promises, for example, I had offers from other directors who wanted to adapt it, and I said, "It's not possible to adapt it. It's not a movie." And it took 10 years for me to see that it was a possible movie. So, honestly, I didn't think so. Same with Holy Lands, which are the 2 books that I adapted. I just I felt that it was very hard to adapt. It's like in between continents. I couldn't understand how to do it, and it took a long time for me to digest it, also because you need to know how to betray your own work, because it's not the same way to write a novel and to write a screenplay.
Right.
But the plus side is that your characters are so built up. There's so many backstories that you would write in a novel that then you have to cut off in the script, but still make your character very strong because you've thought about it so much. So it's double the work compared to something you write directly as a script.
That was one of my questions of and you phrased it so well with the writerly phrase of "betray your own words," which I love that I'm a big fan of books that give me a turn of phrase like that. I love the way that you phrase that. Is that the main challenge of being a successful screenwriter then, of your own work? Is it you it's not necessarily a skill issue, it's, "Hey, these are words I put down on the page, I struggled over, I fought for these words." And that was the main challenge that you had in adapting those 2 films for this or those 2 books for the screen?
I think you can be in love with your own work when you start
Yeah.
writing a screenplay. You just have to be efficient. A screenplay is not a piece of art per se, it's a tool to make a good movie. So you need to just extract, I think, the bones, the structure of it all, and be able to say goodbye to a lot of scenes that might be very interesting but have nothing to do in a movie. So I think that's the hardest part.
Wow. Wow, so you almost see a screenplay as a recipe, right? Of here's a recipe, but it's not the director is the chef, the one who adds the ingredients, might fudge a little bit of the numbers. So then that's such an interesting way to see it. So then how are screenplays judged in your mind? If it's more just I won't perfunctory isn't what you're saying, but if it's more just a mechanical act of putting words that give the director a recipe, how can you tell the difference between a good screenplay and then not a good screenplay?
I think it's more than that, but it's just that, for example, if I read a screenplay and someone is trying to have a style and the descriptions are endless, I'm just
Right.
bored. That's not the job of a screenplay, but the dialogues, the structure, the way you say things without saying them. That's a good screenplay. A good screenplay will make you understand the situation without being specific about it. It's if a man embraces a woman and tells, "I hate you," but
Right.
he's holding to her, you will understand that he loves her, but you won't say it. And so to me, a good screenplay is how do you show that? How do you make us understand through images the reality of a situation or a character? So that's super hard to do and very interesting. And to me, the work of a screenwriter is the most important, but it's just the start of it all. So once you have the ability to give that to a directors, to actor, it's a collective work, and I just feel that everyone is important on a set. Everyone should be celebrated because it's always a miracle when a movie is good. It means
Right.
everyone did his like
100%.
a job well, but without a good screenplay, it's impossible to get a good movie. With a good screenplay, you can still get a bad movie, but that's the start of it all. So yeah, you need the ingredients, as you said, for the recipe, and then let's see how it goes. But without that starting point, it's impossible.
Do you think a screenwriter should direct films just so they know, okay, here's what I should be doing differently? Because how would they get that knowledge unless, let's say I write a screenplay, I've never directed a film, how would they get that knowledge to have that without actually being on the other side of it, having the screenplay and being forced to direct something that has those deficiencies?
Maybe not direct, but have the ability to be on a set and sit
Yeah.
next to a director and understand the process. I think it gives us a lot of understanding, but I would say also, to me, they should all go to an editing room, because that's how your job is going to be revised and redone, and you will understand a lot of things that were written and were not needed. There's this very beautiful anecdote of Capra's first movie where he screens his movie. There's no reactions or bad reaction in the room. Then a second time it's the same, and the third time he takes away the two first, how do you call it? The rolls. In French you say les
Yep.
bobines, the two first film rolls away. He just cut them off and starts the film 15 minutes after. And
Wow.
apparently it's a masterpiece and people applaud. So sometimes you need to be able to cut off what you think is the foundation of a script or a story, but it's just something that you needed, but maybe the audience don't. So I just feel it's a chemistry and understanding the work of every single person on a set is super important, and I think everyone should be able to go and see how it goes in the editing room, on a set, and before that.
That's incredible. This has been such an incredibly informative conversation for me, Amanda, and I just blown away by it. The 3 features that you've done, Holy Lands, Madam, and then Promises coming out on VOD in September in the United States and worldwide. Is it worldwide streaming, Amanda?
It was out in the theaters in a lot of countries. I feel it's just like the places where it couldn't get out because it was unfortunately released during COVID. So it was a long,
Yeah.
yeah, long process. But I'm glad that like American audience can now discover it.
If you had a few words to if somebody's listening to who hasn't watched your films yet, introduce them to your work, what would you say about the films? Is there a through line that you looking back at the 3, you can see of, "Oh, this is the themes that I'm focused on and the things that I care about?"
I think there's always a social commentary in my movies between a storyline that seems very intimate. It looks like I'm speaking about a family or the destiny of a woman, but behind that, there's always something that is almost political to me. And it's my way to see the world, and I hope people can ask themselves questions. In all of my movies, there's a very strange tone because I it's not comedies, but you sometimes laugh. It just looks like life. You laugh, you cry, there's a lot of emotions, but it's very hard to put the movie in a box. So, yeah, it looks a lot like who I am in life, and I think that with all of my faults and all of the things that you might like too, it's something very sincere. So in that matter, I felt it's really authors' movies because I'm not looking to make you love me. I'm just giving my all, and maybe you'll love me. So it's always very complicated for a writer director when you give something so honest and so personal, because when people don't like my movie I feel that they don't like me, which is
Right.
not true, but I need to work on that. But yeah, it's I think I've been very influenced by the Italian cinema,
Okay.
the neo-realism movies. So if you like this type of cinema, it's I think it's really close.
So that's a really great segue to my next question, which is about the casting, right? The casting is phenomenal in all 3 of your movies, and that sort of votes by the actors, right? Actors normally, they're trying not to be in films that are lukewarm or mixed. Now, if you go on review sites, which I think what you're referring to is this idea of look at the reviews for the films and it's mixed. And I feel looking back at the things that you said about how you're not trying to make people happy, necessarily not offering cotton candy in the films to just, ooh, this will make my audience happy. So the roundabout way that I'm getting to this question is the actors, the incredible casting, I think, has come from the fact that the scripts are solid and people trust you as a director. So why do you think that hasn't necessarily translated to reviews? Or do you think that it just in general, if you're challenging people, there's gonna be some people that like it, some people that don't like it. That's just the way that it is.
It's very extreme in the reviews. It's either
Yeah,
people adore it or they hate it, which is like in both case, maybe a bit too much, but at the end
yeah,
of the day, I'd rather have movies that create a strong emotion, even if it's reject, than something in between, "Oh, the movie was okay." People
right.
remember the films, and I feel that's the same with actors. Sometimes actors read my script, they don't understand my universe at all, and sometimes, like you said, I had wonderful actors come on board because they fell in love with the script and they felt safe with me, and I respect them. I respect their work a lot, so I feel that being an actor on one of my sets is always a pleasure because I feel like I said before, it's a collaborative work, so I'm very open to their perspective, to the first take is always their own vision. I would never impose something before we start. So I always want their truth, the way they envision things, and then we start from the first take and build up together. We ask questions together. I just feel that this togetherness thing is something very strong on my sets, even if I am making the final decisions, I'm still
Right.
very eager to hear what everyone has to say. I think that's also the fun part of directing. I think if you're too closed and you don't listen to anyone else, you won't end up doing something human. You need humanity to come in.
And do you think that most directors are like that? Or do you think that is a pretty unique experience for actors on your sets?
So it depends. Apparently, Jonathan Rhys Meyers told me on Holy Lands, "Oh, you work exactly like Woody Allen." I was like, "Oh."
And you're like, "Wait a second."
He said, "You're exactly like Woody Allen." I told him, "Physically, what do you" and he was like, "You work exactly in the same way." I was flattered. It's a director that I've admired for
Right.
years, and but so apparently, yeah, some other directors do. I'm the friend the female version. But
Uh,
I think we all have different ways of working. I think it's the CEO of a company, everyone would direct a team differently. I think the fact that I'm a woman
yeah.
also makes things different. I feel the way that I embody power or authority to me is very motherly. I have a tendency to take care of my crew and my actors. I want them to feel very safe. So yeah, it's my temper, who I am, who and then sometimes I'm also shouting and being authoritarian when things don't go right. But on in a perfect version of everything and on a perfect day, it would be just having fun together. I think we tend to forget how amazing it is to do this type of work. It's so playful. It doesn't mean there's so many other things at risk, and I know there's a lot of money behind it, but it's
Yeah.
so joyful to be able to be on a set all together and be able to work with our passions that I never forget that even when it's hard, I remember that I'm so lucky to do that. So, yeah, it's very peaceful on my sets.
Because there's something really special about filmmaking, right? I'm imagining you in front of your computer working on your novels, or maybe you typewrite or handwrite or whatever it is, but you're having that personal experience by yourself. And of course, you can have others read it and all that. But ultimately, it's a solitary adventure, right? You're writing the words on the page. But filmmaking, like you said, when you go on the set, the first action is let the actors cook, let them do what they want to do. It's a collaborative experience. I can't think of another type of art that's like that.
No, I think maybe cooking, like being a
Yeah,
chef.
cooking.
Yeah, being a chef in a restaurant, to me, is very close to acting. I've been
Yeah,
in some kitchens of big famous chefs. I've been lucky enough to see how they're working. And yeah, you need to trust the guy who's doing the sauce, even if it's your recipe. He will add his twist to the way he just works on it. And so you need to trust all of these people and bring together at a precise moment something magical. So I feel it's really close. But yeah, other than that, it's so strange, like, this work is very unique and very hard to understand. For people, it's still for us, it's clear, but for most people, it's very blurry. What is the real
right.
part of a director? What does he do on set? Oh, you're not the one holding the camera, but so what? How do They don't really understand what it means, and I'm still trying to figure it out myself. I think it takes years to really understand this craft.
So if directing and movie making is like cooking, then it would make sense that French people are good at it. You've moved to Los Angeles and opened a company in 2017. Can you talk about the differences between I assume you're still working, you have connections in France and still working both on US and French projects. Can you talk about the differences in the films in each country and what you talked a little bit earlier about the kind of projects you take on, but what does your production company do generally year to year on your projects?
So my production company is trying to build bridges between Europe and the US on two different sides. First, artistically, but also on the financing point, because it's harder and harder now to get the type of movies I do financed right now. It's almost impossible. If I had to go only through the US market, I just in between budget movies are disappearing unless you want to go work with a streamer. But theatrically, there's no more release for this type of movies, or
Right,
very little ones. So what I try to do is find ways to have a European component to a project. It might be a strong European actor that will bring you financing from Europe, or it could be your American actor going to shoot elsewhere where you could get tax credits or tax incentives from another country, or get some interest from European partners. So that's the more business side of what I do. But so I look for stories that will organically tell that. We're not creating them artificially. But for example, the last movie I produced, Mafia Mama, was based on one of my ideas, and it worked exactly that way because it was about this character that Toni Collette plays, and she's this soccer mom, desperate because her kid goes off to college, her husband is cheating on her, and so she's crying all day long. She's this very nice woman, and she received this phone call saying she inherited from her grandfather in Italy, and she never knew him. And she's, oh, it's my luck. I'm gonna go to Italy, and it's my eat, pray, love moment. And she gets there and realizes that her grandfather was a mob boss, and she needs to
oh
take
my
over.
god.
And so, yeah, so it's an American actress going to Italy. We shoot in Italy. We need to add another actress, and I had the wonderful Monica Bellucci joining. So at where you start building something that has all of these components, you can then pre-sell it in a lot of territories and make the movie happen. So it's still a movie that's super hard to put together, but if it was only in one country, it would be impossible. No, that's what I'm trying to do.
That's impressive. So, the New York Times recently did an article on the French filmmaking or film going culture, and still in France, theaters are getting sold out. The film attendant culture seems to be strong there. What is it about French cinema and maybe filmmaking that draws people out of their house into theaters? Is it just a purely cultural thing, or is it the films that they're making? Do you think that there's hope for something like that in the United States?
I don't see how things could turn back in the United States. Honestly, I'm not very optimistic about that. In France, I also think that it's a system where there's so much help for young filmmakers. There's so much strong voices that there's a reality in films. It costs money. So even if you're a young filmmaker and you're doing a movie with a million budget, a million
Right.
seems a lot of money, but
Yeah.
for a movie,
Goes
it's not. It's a low budget. There's a limitation of the things you may be able to tell. So you do this movie. You let's say you go to Sundance. A couple of people in the business are gonna watch your movie, you're talented, and then your next job is either you continue doing this type of films or you get spotted by a studio and you go do a superhero movie. But the in between words where there's 4 million budget, I don't even know how to put it together in the US anymore. A24 started doing that and now jumped to big budget movies
right.
now that they've made it. Of course, because there's no space for that. In France, you can get this type of money on a first film quite easily because we have so much way to help filmmakers, young filmmakers. So I understand that we have just more quality project of original filmmaker. We have more difference. We have so many. It's very rich. I vote for the César, which is like the
Right.
Oscar in France, and so I'm lucky enough to have links to all of the production in France. I can see all of the movies, even if I live in LA. And I must say, we have so much talented filmmakers, and it's not that we don't have them in the US. It's just that they cannot express it.
Just so many great things to talk about. So with that, the French Oscars, I was looking through that, and a lot of those films, like you mentioned, aren't available for streaming or any sort of viewing in the United States. Why do you think that is? Is it just because they don't see a profit for it? I assume that's part of it. But also, do you feel French filmmakers don't wanna be pressured to make something that is a global film? They wanna make their story, and they don't wanna have pressure to be like, "Oh, I need to make this for an audience of somebody, say, in Oklahoma can watch it and appreciate it." No, I wanna make my story for France, and I don't care who else has to relate to it.
I don't think they think that way. They just do a movie, and the thing is, there's two different issues about exporting a film. The first one is the casting. When you don't know anyone, it's hard to sell it. How do you even get to that film? And the
Interesting, right.
second issue is the language. I direct movies in English, so my audience is international. My actors are always famous worldwide, even when I was telling you when I produce a movie, Monica Bellucci worldwide, but most
Of
of the
course.
Italian actors won't be famous everywhere. I think the streaming world is changing that. The platforms are now giving you more curiosity about watching movies with subtitles or dubbed. And with the series, you discover sometimes wonderful actors that you didn't know
Right.
before. So we're getting there slowly. But obviously, it's not your first reflex to go and watch a French film because you'd rather go see someone like that you already know
Can
that you
relate.
can
Right.
identify and you can relate to. So I can understand that. But when you see the success of Jacques Audiard at the Oscars or Coralie Farja with The Substance, there's still French films coming, and it's mostly thanks to the Cannes Film Festival.
That's just amazing. But do you think more of those directors want to have you're saying, "Hey, I've directed films with globally known actors," but that's something that's easier said than done. Do you think that's something that, of course, they would wanna have that but through just your connections and just the respect that you've built, you've been able to achieve that. That's hard. That's very hard for somebody to aspire to say.
I think it's also because I direct movies in English, so it makes more sense.
True.
And then
Right.
I understand how the system works. It's very different than in France. In France, you start with your script and you will go to actors. They would attach themselves to the project and then you'll go find financing. So they really trust the script first. On in the US, you would have your script, find the money, and then make offers to actors. So they will only read your script if they know that there's a shooting date and money on it. So it's already a very different energy, the way you build it. And I think directors don't really know how to bypass that. How do you find the money before getting your actors? It's like a vicious circle. So
Right.
you need to know the rules to get there, and they're really different in both countries.
This is just such an incredible interview, Amanda. So, can you talk about what's next for you? You mentioned Promises will be available for streaming in September. Are there any other projects that you can talk about that if somebody is a fan that they can look forward to?
So one movie that I produced, I'm very proud of, and I think for all cinema lovers, I think you should interview her. That's okay.
I love that.
I'm gonna introduce you to Bonnie Timmerman. Bonnie is a
Yes.
legendary casting director. I was lucky enough to work with her on Holy Lands, and as we were working together, she told me, "Oh, I have all these tapes that I need to take care of, and I'm bringing to Boston University." I'm like, "What tapes are you mentioning?" She said, "All the casting I've done since I started my career." And I was, "What? I'm doing a documentary about that." I produced a documentary. We can see Ben Stiller at 15, young Mark Ruffalo that also is speaking later on, Liam Neeson. She discovered half of Hollywood, and she also
What?
brought new faces in the industry, like women in parts of men, just a lot of diversity when it wasn't in fashion. She started working with Michael Mann, casting Miami Vice with all these new faces that she discovered. And well, the documentary is great. It went to Venice Film Festival. It's available on VOD on all platforms. And I want you to meet Bonnie because she's a legend. She has so much anecdotes and you'll love her.
Wow. Amanda Stairs, a filmmaker, this has been such an incredible treat to talk with you about your career, your films, your thoughts on filmmaking in the United States and France. Thanks for joining me today.
Much same here.